Perfect. Thank you, Professor Hall.
So welcome everybody to week 2 of the course. Just a reminder, Professor Sutton and I will be kind of swapping weeks from time to time. So you had me this week, but I think you'll have him the next 5 weeks after this before I return after the spring break. So today's class, we're going to have 2 guest speakers to show how you can use sports marketing data, specifically sports marketing and data that is we have access to because of the NYU library paying a subscription fee. That one of our guest speakers is the president of that organization and has come in and kind of talk and show you guys how to use the data. And our second guest speaker is a former student who took this class last year, used that data for his final project, kind of imagined him working at a dream team that he would like to work for, ended up bumping into that team. Was it at the Sloan conference or separately?
That was separately.
Okay.
I just saw the job was available.
So just applied to an internship over the summer, ended up getting it, and in part by showing the work he had done in this class using this data. And they were very impressed with how he had applied it. And then the second half of the class, we're going to talk about Python. So Neil, why don't you introduce yourself? Here's a little slide about you, but I think you do a better job of telling your story.
All right. Well, first of all, I appreciate Professor Hall calling us in. I think, as you can probably tell, Professor Hall and I have developed a great relationship, and I've developed a great relationship with NYU. Truth be told, my daughter Melissa is a graduate of NYU Stern, as she got her MBA while she worked, and it's been a wonderful experience. And as he said, we've got a unique opportunity today. That number one, we're going to have 2 of us, or David, who's going to be in class, telling a little bit about his story. And from my standpoint, the most important thing is, what are the stories? And we're going to talk a little bit about really the double entendre, or the double meaning of that particular sentence. I'm going to talk a little bit also about one of, well, not your classmates, but one of Professor Hall's students, who last year did such an amazing job on her final project. I was so impressed that we decided to develop that into a case study that we presented at the Sports Marketing Association conference in October. And Chloe flew down and had an opportunity to present the case and meet a number of, a lot of the people in the organization. So there's really there's a long game here to be played. And I know, getting up this early, you're probably wondering, hey, these guys you're going to have to do a lot to keep me interested or keep me awake, but hopefully that's going to happen. So let me tell you a little bit about me and about my company, and then maybe David, maybe you could introduce yourself, and then we can kind of move through. First you and I can talk a little bit, and then we could dive into the data. Professor Hall, what's my time limit or time cap?
You have no time cap. You could keep going. I mean, obviously class ends in like 2 hours.
Oh yeah, no.
20.
Yeah.
What is it? 10:20. Yeah, 10:20. Sorry.
I think 50 minutes will be enough. I'd like to be able to talk for 45 minutes and then maybe have some questions at the end. As both David can tell you and also Professor Hall, I am very accessible. I'm not a person that runs and hides. Hey, thanks a lot, but don't call me. It's just the opposite. So let me tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about my company, and a little bit about some of my philosophies. So, first of all, I want to welcome you to SBRNet, stands for Sports Business Research Network, but we're SBRNet. And we are the exclusive providers of a platform called Sports Market Analytics. And Sports Market Analytics is just what it says. It is a site that applies and brings to you data that you can use for all sorts of analytics. But the one thing in common about all analytics is the word data. You can't do anything without data. You can't do data analytics without data. You can't do AI without data. You can't do machine learning without data. You can't do anything without data. And we live in this very unique time of a data-driven world, because data used properly will drive facts, and facts are what matters. Fact-based decision making. I can't tell you how many times during my 26 years of working in marketing research and the sports industry, I've walked in and had listened to stories that CEOs have told me about things that they thought were facts. And once I showed them the data, it's like all of a sudden their facts turned into their, non-facts. So, or anecdotal stories. So SBRnet, I bought the service about 2.5 years ago. We serve around 250 universities and colleges worldwide. Plus, we've also got a number of marketing agencies, ad agencies, associations, in a lot of cases, people that you might look to for jobs, once you're out of school. As David will tell you, he's working in a brand new hockey federation called the Premier Hockey Federation. We're going to talk a little bit about them. I met them at the same place David met them, I believe, at the MIT Sloan Conference last year. But our data, our site is really designed to be a one-stop location for all things data, but all things also related content to help you further that process along. We're not here to just give you the data and tell you, hey, good luck. We're here to give you the data and then give you some ways that you're able to use it and also understand it. So it's really a very comprehensive approach. We believe, in this data-driven world. I believe in this data-driven world. As I said, I've been in this business for over 26 years. I've worked at some of the leading brands in the sports business. Whether it's been for sneaker brands like Skechers, Adidas, Nike, Columbia, or working with leagues, teams. I've done a lot of work in the financial community, both on the buy side, sell side of the equity research world, which is actually where Professor Hall comes from, but also in the private equity world, where private equity firms are deciding, do I want to put money behind a particular venture? Do I want to put money behind a particular sport? Well, I was the guy they called when it came to all things sports. So what I did was, I'm pretty good at being able to use data to be able to really tell a story. Between me and my partner, we've got over 50 years of experience in the sports business. So if you're serious about a position, about a job in sports, that's going to be where you want to land. Well, you know what? I would suggest, taking some notes, pay attention today, because we live in this data-driven world. So David, why don't you talk a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so I'm a senior at NYU, same program you guys are, with a concentration in analytics. I took this class a year ago now, I guess.
You also claim this was the only headshot available.
Yeah, I don't have many professional pictures of myself, so enjoy my senior year choir photo. Probably need to get some more, but that's a problem for another day. I've also taken 3 classes, or I'm in my 3rd class with Professor Hall now, so he is a very valuable resource, especially if you're interested in going into the data side of sport. I'm working with him and Alpha Play, the company you founded, right?
Yeah, it's a product of the
Okay, yeah. On a project for the hockey team that I currently work for, the Metropolitan Riveters, who I basically run their analytic division of on it.
David, talk a little bit about the Riveters and what they're a part of.
Yeah, so the Riveters are a part of the Premier Hockey Federation, formerly known as the National Women's Hockey League. It is a relatively recent startup league. Their first season was in 2015, and we were one of the founding 4 members. There's now 7 teams. And we're looking to basically create a self-sufficient women's professional hockey league. And I feel like we're doing pretty well at that. The salary cap's gonna jump from $750,000 to $1.5 million at the start of next season, which is fairly significant for, you know, a league that hasn't even been around for 10 years yet. If you look at the growth rate, it's phenomenal. It was like 150,000 3-4 years ago. So, you know, we're really trying to make it to where the upper echelon of women's hockey players can pursue it as a financially like possible career. And so,
And just another thing is you started out, I mean, you currently are an intern, right?
yeah.
After you showed them your capabilities of using data and analytics, what did they talk to you about titles and things like that?
I work directly under the president and the GM, and my boss, the GM of the team, basically just started calling me her assistant GM to like everyone. And that's how she'd introduce me to like other teams, coaches and stuff like that. Like, hey, this is David, or my assistant GM. Like, if you need anything, talk to him. So
David's still a student at NYU and she's calling him her assistant GM. You know, last night I just happened to be kind of flicking around the channels. It's like a million channels. And you know what I landed on? I landed on Moneyball. And you know, ended up watching the movie, and you know, Brad Pitt plays Billy Bean and Jonah Hill plays Peter Brand. Peter Brand was the David Sutherland of the Oakland Athletics. Peter went to Yale, was a believer in the famous Bill James equations, which is really the forebearer of this whole kind of Moneyball data-driven movement. And it was really interesting. David, what I'd like you to do before I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about, you know, process and a little, because I'm a big process guy. I think if you understand your process, it's like a recipe. You know, if you understand your recipe, it's a lot easier to make a product. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the Chloe Kim situation from last year. So Professor Hall had a similar class last year, and one of the students, Chloe Kim, you know, the students got to select their own topics. I think I gave about 14 or 15 different general ideas. I wanted to make sure that, you know, people selected topics that I had data for. And Chloe's idea was so unique. Chloe wanted to take a data-driven approach to moving a professional hockey franchise. So she's a big hockey fan, something that she's interested in. She took a look at, you know, all of the data and things like that and determined that the Phoenix Coyotes were a loser in Phoenix. And using data, where could we relocate them to? And then what's the process that we would go through in order to be able to tell a story about why their selected location made a lot of sense? I'm going to skip to the end of the story because that's just the kind of guy I am. But we determined, and I will say that she determined, and then we help her back it up, that the city of Houston was the ideal location for the Phoenix Coyotes to land. And we used a data-driven process. We looked at the strengths and weaknesses of both markets, Phoenix and Houston. We looked at the opportunities in Houston and the lack of opportunities in Arizona, in Phoenix. And then we looked at some of the threats. What are some of the things that might have stopped this or made this process not work? And we brought in data from a variety of sources. We used, I'd say 80% of the data came from SBRnet and Sports Market Analytics, but we also brought in data from the US Census. We also brought in data from an organization called Team Sports Report that has a lot of data that actually I don't have. And then we also brought in some data from the respective cities. So, you know, my one message here is that in your process, keep an open mind, get as much data as you can involved early.
This is with your final project. So Chloe was doing her final project in this class and used SBRNet data combined it with some help from Neil to then present what was our final project here at the premier sports marketing conference, like they, in North Carolina last year.
Yes. And it was just so we had such wonderful reactions because it was a wonderful example of the data-driven decision process or data-driven strategic decision process. So David, what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about maybe your process and some of the things that you have going on. Tell us a little bit about what you think are the strengths of the Premier Hockey Federation that you're working with and the Riveters.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strengths are that it's really a blank slate for us to kind of try new things, and especially the Riveters, we kind of play in an unconventional rink now. We moved from playing in the Devil's practice facility to, I don't know if you guys know what the American Dream is. It's like that entertainment complex directly across from that Life Stadium. There's a rink.
Is it the Mega Mall?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you go down 95 and there's this huge structure. Yeah.
It's like the sister mall to the Mall of America or something like that, but we're not supposed to call it a mall in front of that branding, whatever. But yeah, and so like we've gotten to try a bunch of new things, just as a league and as a team, especially because we are so young. We're looking for consistent fans. We're trying to find our niche, I guess, in the hockey world. And also, we're expanding as a league. I think that there are rumors, quote unquote, of next expansion is going to be to Washington. The team in Montreal started playing this season. So, consistently growing as well, which will definitely help us reach out to different markets as needed. So
what's interesting is you talked about expansion, but that process that Chloe Kim used in her final project in this class could be very, very similar.
Yes.
Deciding where new teams should go in
Yeah.
any sport, right? In the women's hockey and the men's baseball, there's talks about expansion. So it's really, really powerful because that's your franchise value.
Yeah.
You pick the right market and you might double the value of the organization you own compared to if you pick the wrong market.
exactly.
One of the things that people forget about when we talk about franchise values, look, we all love to talk about venues, buildings. They don't own their own building. Number two is they like to talk about, team legacy and team history. But guess what? They got no history. So, the last thing is they talk about their fans. Well, how does a league that basically starts with 0 fans, and how does a team that basically starts with no fans build a fan base? David, what do you think are the biggest weaknesses of both the Premier Hockey Federation and as well as the Riveters?
It's just hard kind of to reach out to people when you're starting up like that. So, we sometimes have issues in finding that sort of base for us to reach out of people in the area who would be interested in like attending a women's hockey game. That's something I've done a lot of work on, is like reaching out to people. I have basically a comprehensive list that I made myself of women's hockey organizations in the New Jersey area. And I send out emails, I call people, kind of just say like, hey, would you like to come out to a game? Stuff like that. But it's not like we're not really established at the point. So, whenever I introduce what the Riveters are, people usually don't know. So I think that's kind of our biggest weakness. As well, just like the obvious financial side of things, like it is a startup. We can't just spend, a ton of money on advertising. So we really need to be like smart in decision making to where we put those dollars and put our kind of time and effort into.
It's smart, it's strategic, and it's opportunistic.
Yep.
David, I don't know if you're kind of following this, Professor Hall, you might be, but I'm really trying to lay out this framework. Remember, I talked about process. And one of my processes, and one of the things I like to talk about is this thing called a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Look, I went to Syracuse University and majored in marketing. And my junior year, I remember, walking into a higher level marketing class and the professor talking about this thing called a SWOT analysis. Well, I graduated college in 1979, and don't you dare do the math to figure out how old I am. But, the one thing that stuck with me, many years later, and I can't even talk about how many years later it is, but is that this is still relevant today. Because if you can narrow down, or you can find the strengths, you can understand the weaknesses, you can identify the opportunities, and then make sure that you also identify the threats. David, what do you think is the big opportunity for the Premier Hockey League and also the Riveters?
I mean, that like creating a top level women's professional hockey league is something that, it's such a shared vision amongst the owners, the players, even like the fans who've been following for a while, because, these are countless former Olympians. I got to hold a gold medal because one of our players was on the 2018 US women's team that won gold. So that was,
Who was it?
Amanda Pelkey.
Sure.
And I just have to interrupt the story. When you explained to her what you were doing with data and analytics, from what you learned here at NYU, for the team, what was her reaction? This gold-winning hockey player.
Yeah, a lot of surprised expletives, I guess. Like, holy shit, you're able to do that for us? Like, so, I would definitely recommend, like, if you guys are interested in working in data, like, find a company that really needs it, because they'll let you kind of try new things and stuff like that. Because, like, I'm working with Professor Hall. I can talk more about that later if you guys are interested. It's less of marketing and more of like player evaluation stuff. So I'll put that to the side for now, but
AI Moneyball, right?
it's pretty much,
Yeah, I mean, we're not really into the player performance side of things. That's not really our area of expertise. We do have some of that data. We're going to talk a little bit about the data in a minute. But let me just kind of amplify what David said. Now, look, I'm skipping ahead, and if I have my numbers wrong, please don't raise your hand and say, "Hey, Mr. Schwartz, or Neil." You can call me Neil, by the way. You said this, and I said, well, okay, I'm getting old. I may have got my numbers wrong. There are approximately 56 million current fans to the NHL, of which about 40% of them are women. Do the math. There is a big market, or a big opportunity, or a big sense of that there are a lot of women hockey fans of the NHL. Now, does that mean all those women are going to be fans of the Premier Hockey Federation? All those women are going to be Premier? No, it doesn't. But does it mean that might be a good place to start? Yes, it does. And, there's also about 20% of people who play ice hockey in the United States. I think I got that right, by the way, are also women. Does that seem, is that the number I showed you, David?
Yeah.
So is that a good place to maybe go looking for fans? As David indicated, it probably is, because he's already calling, a lot of these hockey leagues and talking to women, women's hockey coaches and women's hockey organizations and all that, because, he wants to, I love this expression, by the way, go fishing where the fish are. And that is something that just makes all the sense in the world. You want to try to go fishing where the fish are. David, before I ask you about threats, and actually I might hold off on that for now, can you tell a little bit about your experience last year at the MIT Sloan Conference with the Houston Dynamos?
Well, I didn't meet the Dynamo at the Sloan Conference.
Oh, okay.
I met the Riveters at the Sloan Conference, but I think I know where you're trying to get to. So basically what he's talking about is, for my final presentation for this class, I did, for my favorite soccer team, the Houston Dynamo. We had problems like getting fans in the stands for the last like 10 years or so. So I basically used a lot of SBRnet data, stuff like MLS is on average by far the youngest fan base of all top five, like the top 5 American sports leagues, stuff like that, as well as like, more tailored specifically towards the team, like where do we perform well, where do we perform poorly, as well as he mentioned with Chloe, like I used a lot of the demographic data about the city of Houston, like, you know, the like Salvadoran communities, Mexican communities, Honduran communities, stuff like that. And there was a ticket sales and service summer internship available. So I just reached out and I talked with them and I like applied and I was like, hey, you know, I've been a big fan of the team for a long time. I did a final project for my marketing analytics class about the team. And we talked a little bit about that during the interview. And then in like the, I think like 6th week of my time there, I got to present the presentation that I made with a little bit of tweaks to be a little more nice and not get fired halfway through my internship on the stuff I was saying.
Who'd you present?
Yeah, it was to the VP of marketing, the president of, I guess his title is like president of ticket sales and service, like, you know, basically people whose jobs I would want to be in, like, you know, 10, 15 years, 20 years down the line, working for my favorite soccer team. Just kind of, I was the one sitting up there, you know, explaining to them what we need to do. And it ended up in me for like the second half of my internship, working closely with a lot of the higher ups in creating, you know, opportunities for us to reach out to Hispanic communities in Houston. So we started doing monthly like pickup soccer games where if your team won, like you got a free ticket, stuff like that. And it was like, you know, entirely in Spanish. We sent out like our staff members who could speak Spanish, stuff like that.
And this is because I think you used SBRnet data to show that Hispanics love soccer, right? It is one of their top sports. Yet you could look at the Dynamo's data and see that, what's the percentage of Hispanics that live in Houston?
It's like, I think 1/3.
1/3. So then
Houston's the 4th largest city in the country, and you're trying to sell 19,000 seats to a game.
What's interesting about also the Hispanic population or Latinx or whatever you want to use as your name for it, and I know this basically from other research that I've done, is that the Latin community love to do things as a family. So if you're able to bring, you know, if you're able to convince a family of Latin descent or Hispanic descent to come, they're not just going to come, you know, husband and wife. It's going to be the whole family if they have kids, grandma. I mean, they just love to do things as a family. And, you know, again, knowing this, understanding this, and being able to apply this and use our data to help tell the story about the potential size of the prize. And that's, I want to kind of start getting into a little bit more about the data now, David. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, but do me a favor. Don't be afraid to interrupt me at any point and say, hey, you know, this to make your point. Okay. And also obviously Professor Hall, but so SBRnet is this one-stop platform for all things data. And I'm not going to get into, this is actually my 3rd slide in the presentation, but I'm not going to get into, you know what, let me do this. Let me make it bigger. Sorry about that. There we go. So SBRnet brings in data from a variety of different sources. Number one is that we bring in other people's data. So our participation data, as an example, comes from the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. It is the largest study of sports participation done in the United States by a long shot. And the reason why I know that is I used to do it. So I am really proud the fact that we offer this unbelievable resource of participation data. We've got sales data, product sales data. Again, we bring in this data from a variety of actually different sources and kind of aggregate it together because there's really no one, I would say, one stop or one great source for all things equipment, sneakers, apparel, and those related categories. But again, we give you enough information to be able to look at, you know, what's the size of the category here in the United States? What's the projected growth rate or CAGR, you know, and then, you know, where do we think it's going to end up? What's the average unit cost? So we're giving you that data, but where we really shine is the data we make. And the data we make comes from our yearly SBRnet Sports Fan Study, which right now is currently in the field being collected. So every year since 2012, SPRnet has been doing one of the largest yearly studies of sports fans done anywhere in the United States. Um, we're very proud of what we do because number one is that we cover 18 sports. No one has that type of coverage. And by the way, that includes people like Nielsen, that includes people like Sports Atlas, that includes a lot of other sources out there. So we cover 18 sports, everything from professional sports, college basketball and football, minor league sports, and even things like, auto racing, MMA, esports. There is no one covering esports the way we do. No one. And I can say that with 100% authority because I've been at a few esports conferences and people are always amazed when I show it to them. We have 65 separate categories of data, and these categories are represented up on the screen right now. So, for each part of the work that David did, he was able to tap into a lot of different categories of data. So as an example, to understand the size of the prize or the size of the audience, you can go look at things like game attendance, past, present, and future. You can look at viewership habits, traditional TV plus streaming. You can look at a number of different areas. You can look at fan demographics, age, household income, education. But all of the data comes from the same survey instrument or the same survey document. Right now, again, the survey's in the field. We interview between 5,500 and 6,500 sports fans every year. It looks like this year we're going to exceed 6,500. We're getting such an amazing response from consumers that they're so anxious to tell us what are their favorite teams. They are. And then once they start, they can't seem to stop. So we're really excited about this year's collection. I'm going to show literally a lot more granularity in terms of the data and what you can do with it. But understand one thing, this data that we're going to talk about does not, I repeat, not come from a black box. As Professor Hall can tell you, there's a lot of people out there providing data, but they're not willing to tell you where it comes from. I am. We know exactly where our data comes from. We know exactly the methodology that we use in order to collect it. And what did we do? Well, every great design, every great building, every great invention has always started with one thing, a model. So what we did was we built a model of the United States. And we based this model on persons 13 years and older. So by the way, we're covering the new Gen Alpha, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go on. But we built a model based on age, income, ethnicity, household size, presence of children in the household. That I think I said education, geographic region, and gender. So we take those parameters, we build this model of what the United States looks like in terms of people. We then collect based on that model. So again, we're collecting the scale and projecting to the whole. So everything that we're going to show in terms of data is projected out to the entire US population ages 13 and above. I need more coffee. So again, I just kind of blew through the methodology real quick. We've got a lot of historical data. David, let me ask you a question. When you were doing your assignment, how important was historical data and looking at trends, whether things were growing or going, improving or declining?
I mean, like the whole point of my presentation was to kind of see, like, they used to sell a lot of tickets, and I was trying to figure out why that declined. And as well, historical data was really important because that was, I guess, like a year removed from when fans weren't allowed in the stands or only partially because of the pandemic. So, I needed a significant sample size to, I guess, just kind of like follow those trends and be able to compare like yearly, especially like even taking out team performance of that. So like we made it to the Western Conference Finals in 2017, but then, you know, in 2016 or 2018, we weren't as good. Were there any trends you can notice between those 2 years to see if there's anything we can improve on even outside of team performance?
And I just wanted to say something. So David, I mean, we've kind of like explained what you've done and it's really impressive. Like, I don't want to make it sound like you're some unapproachable genius, right? Like, right?
He's not.
So like, in reality, what special skills did you need to understand SBRnet's data other than just being a fan of the team and the league? Did you need any other kind of special skills?
I mean, Excel downloaded on your computer, but that, you know, you get that for free thanks to NYU, so you don't really need much. It's fairly intuitive, you know, it is a significant amount of data. So, you know, don't let it daunt you when you open it up and you see like 100 different tabs and a whole bunch of numbers. Like you can read through it and it's fairly intuitive. Like, you know, you're able to find exactly what you need.
David, let me get through this and then I'm going to start showing data. How's that sound?
Okay.
So you know, I'm a process guy. I said that probably more than once, and it drives my partner nuts sometimes. But for me, everything's about this idea about the collection process. I want to accumulate and collect as much data. I want as many articles. I want as much information. I want to know before I go. And you know, make sure that you understand the difference between search and research. When you jump on Google and start looking up the Premier Hockey League or Federation, that's not research, that's search. When you jump on my site and go to my mega search feature in the upper right-hand corner, that's not research, that's search. But as you start to dive into the process, you will start to use research, which is data, fact-driven data. And it's going to help you be able to understand all of these things that I have up on the screen. And, you know, skipping to the last bullet point, I started to work on that SWOT analysis idea with David. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to show you the SBRnet site and hopefully it comes up. Yep. Way, I love it when a plan comes together. And first of all, I am not logged in.
And Neil, just to kind of give a new example to what you said about search and research, if you open up Chat GPT
I've never used it.
in these kind of targeted questions that you're interested in, that a team would be interested in, that executives and presidents at a team would be interested in, you are not going to get the kind of answer that you could ever get if you weren't using this data, right? Like it's just too nuanced, granular. It requires creative thinking to solve problems. This data is extremely powerful and you can't just replace it by, say, Chat GPT.
So number one is that everyone in this room has access to everything I'm going to be showing you today via the NYU library. You must be logged on to the library website. You can access it both on campus and off campus. So you have full access. If for some reason you're not able to get access to the data, I would tell you to send an email to Professor Hall, but you know what? Skip a step, send it right to me at neil@sbrnet.com and I'll troubleshoot the problem.
And there's a link.
What's that?
I have a link in these slides, these class slides on the slide.
Okay.
Where Neil, Neil's bio is. There's a note at the bottom where that's the link you could click to get to this data through the website, the NYU website.
So as I said earlier, you know, search process starts with, you know, operating in that funnel world, you know. So I typed in hockey and you know what? A crap load of stuff comes up. I have 4 analysts that are combing all of the major sports publications every day and determining what is that data that's related to our, you know, to what we do that we could put in, you know, to the, you know, put into to help students, to give you some idea, to give you some direction. Funny, here's something I didn't even see yesterday. I just typed in the word hockey, and there's an article here about the Coyotes mullet arena. I don't even know what that means. Bringing hockey despite financial haircut. Yeah, they
It's
dropped. What's
the
that?
rank. It's the name of the rank.
Oh my God. Why don't they just call it like pizza? But it's
Well,
such
I
a,
think,
you know,
yeah, it's named after, because it's ASU's.
I know that.
Yeah, so I think it's named after like,
A donor.
yeah, probably.
There's a guy named Mullet. God. But in here, when you do your search, you're going to get relevant articles, you're going to get relevant data and research, which is all located here. But there's something that David mentioned. David mentioned that he also, when he was, you know, while he was working with Riveters, he went out and looked at a lot of the local organizations to be able to reach out to them, to be able to try to draw fans. We also give you access to the relevant associations and directories. So as an example, here's the American College Hockey Association, or here's the American College, another one, you know, that's designed to promote the sport. David could go right to this website and be able to strike up a communication with Chris Wilk, their executive director. That's, of course, if he would respond. But the idea is we want to give you as much direction, like it's like a GPS for how to do this, you know, is the best way I could describe it. But what you can also do is that you can start to narrow down your search. Here's Premier Hockey. I think this will work. Folks, you just start typing in words just like you do to Google. Okay, but this is more directed, a little bit more focused. So here's an article about from 12/15/2022 about the Premier Hockey Federation. It brought its All-Star game to Canada for the first time. Again, this is wonderful information. Whoops. You know, for you to be able to use. Now, is this every piece of the information in here going to be helpful to you? Hell no. But there might be some really good information that you can use to help you understand the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that the Premier Hockey Federation is in fact facing. David, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Did you use the search feature at all?
Like for my project?
Yeah, any of your projects.
Yeah, for the Dynamo project, I used the search feature a lot because I wanted to specifically look at like other similar teams. So obviously the other teams in Texas, I wanted to kind of like, you know, see what the news was looking like for them. As well as like just go around and see if there were any articles I missed. Obviously, I keep up with the team, so like a lot of the stuff I already see, but it was still nice to kind of have like everything kind of congregated in one spot, you know?
And that's what we're trying to make your lives easier, not harder. You know, we're trying to do a lot of the early legwork for you. So let's talk about data now real quickly. As I said earlier, we've got a lot of it. Number one here is our equipment sales data, apparel, footwear, and of course, equipment. A lot of sports here. I am not going to get into every one of these. Don't worry. But if you want to know, for instance, you know, whatever your sport is, you want to know how many golf bags were sold. I think I have golf data. Ooh, I hope I do. I do. So we know that the golf bag business here in the United States has $377 million at retail. So again, and you can understand what the size, what the growth is. We've got participation data. And by the way, I'm real proud of this because I used to do it. So participation data, 88 sports and activities. Okay, class, time to wake up. What is the fastest growing sport or activity in America right now? Anybody?
MLS is one guess.
No. The fastest growing sport from an activity standpoint is pickleball. You can't go look at the Wall Street Journal. You can't look at the New York Times without looking at the phenomenal growth of pickleball.
Is that really a sport? I'm just joking.
All right. Do you really want to get into this now, Professor?
I mean,
you know, we've got, you know, LeBron James and quarterback. Help me, somebody. Tom Brady investing in this professional pickleball league. You know what? This is, by the way, another great assignment. Where are they going to find fans? They are working with literally a blank sheet of paper. They've got no fans, they've got no league, and they got no media to speak of yet. So, they did a celebrity pickleball event. It actually drew good ratings, but pickleball right now is the fastest growing sport in America. If one of you is looking for an interesting assignment, it could be, where is pickleball going to find fans, which is, by the way, very similar to how the Riveters and the Premier Hockey League are going to try to find fans. So again, we've got this data. But the data I really want to show off right now is, in fact, our sports fan data. And we currently cover, as I mentioned, 18 sports right here across 65 categories of data. Now, let's start thinking about David's situation here. David's the assistant general manager. By the way, cool title. Did you get business cards?
Not yet.
Get them. So even if you have to make them yourself. But let's think about David's situation here for a minute. David might want to start, where am I going to find my fans? Well, let's look at NHL fan data. Remember, he talked about trends. Well, here's trend data back to 2012. Now, we're going to show how the data is already been exported into Excel in a better way than what you're seeing here. Because what you're seeing here is just summary data. This is all aggregated together. It's not broken out by any specific demographic. It's not cross-tabbed against anything. It's just, this is the place where you find your stories. What I like to do is when I'm working in the summary data is I like to write down just some ideas. I have this little notepad that I use with 3x5 cards on it because I write down what I need and then I throw it out when I'm done with it. But, you could write down, you could do anything you want, but here's some of the stories. We know in 2021 that hockey had 56,284,000 fans. All of our whole numbers are in thousands. Just add 3 zeros to everything. So it was up from 2012 of 53,495 up to 56,284, up post-pandemic also. If you look at the pandemic, it had a real rough effect. 2018, 50 million, 2019, pandemic started to kind of creep into our consciousness. 2020, it was here full blown. But then in 2021, as we started to bounce back and they started to play, guess what? Hockey was able to recover. Did they get back to where they were back in 2015, 14, 13? No, they didn't, at least not yet. We're going to be very interested to look at the hockey numbers when they come out in a couple of weeks. But here is, I have selected or cherry picked what I believe are the places where you can go to find stories. David talked about understanding the nature of fans. Well, here's an interesting spot. If we look at younger hockey fans, let's say ages 13 to 17, it's been a pretty precipitous drop from 2012, from 7.6% of hockey fans being the age of 13 to 17 down to 2.8%.
So Neil, let me just ask the class.
Go.
That 13 to 17, I guess, age group and the number of hockey fans there are through time. What's the story that jumps out from this data about 13 to 17-year-olds?
Can I answer? Oh, just kidding. David, how about you?
I mean, I'd say the thing that I kind of thought of when you showed that is that a lot of times youth sports fans come from kids who play the sport, and there's been a drop, at least from, I think, in people playing hockey, because parents think it's too dangerous for their kids to play, or it's expensive, or it's very regional. Like, I'm from Texas and nobody I knew played hockey. Apparently my high school has a team now. But yeah, so, it's been dropping. Youth sports in general, I feel like, have been dropping. Kids don't play as much anymore.
So again, David's right. You can see that from a youth standpoint, the numbers have been dropping precipitously, but they're pretty good among older fans at 50 to 64. But the problem is, what's going to happen as these 50 to 64-year-olds age out to 65 plus? It's going to start to be a problem. And then they age out even more. So, again, you're looking at each one of these different data in a compartmentalized way. Look at the male, female by gender. So as I said, it's about, well, I was wrong actually. It was, a little bit higher of a split for women. In 2012, we were at 42.4% of all NHL hockey fans were women. Now it's down to 33.9. Again, understanding this story, because this, again, gives you a little bit of an idea about, what's going on. What are those threats? What are those challenges that I'm potentially going to encounter? And then how to overcome them. And then down here is a whole bunch of other data. That's a technical term. I would go look at it, go look at social media usage, go look at, go look. But this data is not as helpful because it's not cross-tabbed against anything. But before I start getting into that data, I want to show you something. So remember I talked about a story. And in this story, you're trying to lop as much data into that funnel. Professor Hall, when you're doing your AI and when you're doing machine learning, what's the first goal that you're always, looking? Isn't it, both collection and cleaning of data is the first function usually?
Well, even David could speak to this now. It's a lot of the work is about the data. The data is the rocket fuel that AI needs in order to perform. And if it's not, in a very particular form, very good data, then the AI will not perform.
Right. And you've got to feel good about the data and trust the data and understand that it's coming from a credible source. But let's start working down here. Let's go look at the next step down. And for me, the next step down was I looked at minor league hockey. I used to think that minor league hockey was only, mothers and fathers of people who were playing minor league hockey, but it's not the case. In fact, look at the growth in minor league hockey post-pandemic. Dropped way down out of its 11 million range. At its peak, it was up almost at 14 million, but now it's back to about 11.6 million minor league hockey fans. But me, I like to skip to the end of the story. I went right to the gender split. And what did I find? That the drop in female minor league hockey fans was not as precipitous as the NHL fans. So again, what I'm doing is I'm writing these stories down. I'm making notes of it because I know I'm going to go to more detailed data later. Now, there's another piece of data I would look at. We've got this category called other women's sports. Now, I measure the WNBA separately because they've got a long trail of history. But unfortunately, leagues like the Premier Hockey Federation, the NWSL, the Women's Hockey League, the Women's Soccer League, I guess they used to be the WU. I'm a little confused sometimes in what happens here. But what we've done is we've created this one category called other women's sports. And it essentially includes both professional and amateur women's sports. So it's football. It's hockey, it's lacrosse, it's soccer, it's not basketball, or only it is women's college basketball. But we know there are, in fact, 27,135,000 people out there that enjoy watching, enjoy watching or attending women's sports. And then we can get a look at the breakdown. Here's something really interesting, though. Look at the gender split among those people that say they enjoy watching women's sports. It's very interesting that the larger percent, of course, are men. That might be kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but that 44.1 number is one I would write down. I would also write down that 6.8% number because remember we saw before that 2.8% of NHL fans were in fact ages 13 to 17. Well, it's 6.8% among younger consumers. The goal here is to draw comparisons, be able to find the stories by looking at different types of data. By the way, all this data is easily exportable to Excel. I'm going to run way over time, so let's just keep plowing through. But this is where you kind of find your stories and you find your data. But here's where you go get your data to work with. This is called the premium section. You have access to everything that's here. Your chairman, the chairman of the sports, the Tisch school, the sports, who is, what's his name again? I forgot. Vince.
Dean Gennaro, yeah.
Thank you, Dean Gennaro, and the head of the business library at NYU all decided, you know what? We want it all. And they've got it all. So everything starts first over here at our fan studies tab. I'm going to go back, click on Premiere, click on fan studies. We have our fan studies back all the way to 2017. Now, the reason why they're only back to 2017 is because we started collecting a lot more categories and a lot more information back in 2017. I have the 2012 data up, as you saw before, but this is the data that you work with. Remember I talked about 65 categories of data? Here they are. There is a ton of data here. So whether you want to look at people who attend or watch, you want to look at gender, you want to look at age, you want to look at the region of the country, whatever you want to look at is here. And the best part is, and David will tell you, all of this data is already pre-formatted into Excel.
Yep.
So you don't have to do it. I did it for you. And not only did I do it for you, but I also cross-tabbed it for you to make it easy to you to work with. So let's look at a few examples. I'm going to open up Excel and hopefully this will open. It did, but let me go here for a minute. Okay, so here is the NHL data. Is everyone, yep, I can see you're seeing it. Can everyone see the data though? I want to make sure the data is visible.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. So I'm going to take you way away from it. The first place we're going to go is the methodology. So important that you understand the methodology and that you source the data properly. Right here on the first tab of all the Excel sheets that I'm going to show you right now is the methodology. Learn it. Make sure you understand it. The last thing you want to have happen, and David will tell you this, and Brian, Professor Hall, excuse me, will tell you this, and I'll tell you this, is that if somebody asks you a question in a meeting, where does this data come from? You better know the answer. Because if you have to, say, I don't know, guess what? Everything you said before the words I don't know will now be discounted, and everything you say after the words I don't know will be discounted. So make sure you understand where this data comes from and know it. Each Excel sheet has a table of contents. I don't want you fumbling around. I want you to be able to go right to the data you want to look at. So right here are literally all 65 category or data tabs. Right here, I make it easy as possible. So let's go to gender. What do you say, Dave? Let's start with the gender tab. So what do we know?
Could you zoom in a little bit? Because it's a little small.
I can make it much bigger and then fix it again.
That's great.
That better?
Yep.
Awesome. So what do we know? What is this data? This is coming directly from our annual study. This is 2021. Up at top, it tells you what the question was, gender of those attended or watched any NHL game, and then note, it tells you a little bit about the different categories of data. So number one is that we know that there are 56,284,000 fans of the NHL. We define a fan as somebody who attends live or watches either via streaming TV, their phone, their tablet, whatever. You watch or you attend. We know that 37,183,000 are men, 19,101,000 are in fact women. That's 66% men. Let's round up, we're friends, 34% women. I talked a little bit about that. Very important to make sure that you understand both the percentages, which are right below it, and the whole numbers, which are right above it. We then see also how it breaks down, in terms of percent by age. We can do it by generation. Remember I said I did the cross tabs for you? Across the top, the banner, they call this line, row 6 is the banner. And the banner has all of these different crosstabs: generation, income, census region, education, whether or not they bought licensed merch like David's wearing there. Attended, how many games they attended, how many attended at all. We know that, for instance, 8,233,000 people attended an NHL game out of the 56,284,000 fans. Anybody want to do that math in their head, by the way? No, me either. So it's about I think it's about, I want to say, well, let's see, men it's 10%, women it's I'm not looking at gender. Oh well. So again, we did the banners across the top. Here's all of the data that we cross tab for you. And there's a lot of different, lot.
So
But down here,
you also have viewers, right? You have how many people watched it on cable, satellite, right?
right here. So we
if,
have watched right here on the bottom.
if you, I don't know if somebody's been,
That's small.
but where has the MLS recently sold their streaming rights to their games? Does anybody know what platform? Apple, you said Apple, right? So I think people were very surprised by the amount of money that Apple paid. You know, it was a big sum for MLS.
$2.5 billion over 10 years.
So if you want to go work for a league, and every league out there wants to make maximum money possible selling their revenue, their streaming rights, how could you use this kind of data to approach a league and say, I have an idea of how we can increase the value of your streaming rights?
And what's interesting is that not only can you talk to them about it, let me know if everybody can see this, by the way. We know that 16,230,000 are in fact streaming NHL games one place or another. We know the breakdown between men and women. We know all this. We know how many people added new channels. But guess what I also know? I know where they're streaming stuff. I know that if they're using Amazon Prime or Hulu. I know if they're using Paramount Plus or YouTube or NBC. But guess what? I also know that Apple TV has 890,000 NHL fans that are currently using the Apple service. Would I have necessarily gone to the Apple service to make that deal? I don't know. I might have looked at, I don't know, somebody else. But, you know, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of interesting things here.
You can literally pitch each single streaming person differently. You could say, Apple, look, most of the fans of this sport are not subscribers to you. If you get these streaming rights, you could get millions of more customers who are not currently your customers, as opposed to like maybe 80% of MLS fans already are subscribed to Disney Plus. Why would Disney Plus then go out of the way to get those streaming rights, right? So this data is so powerful that it could literally affect, you know, if you use it properly in a league, it could really materially affect the purchase price of your streaming rights.
And it could affect your ability to be able to generate sponsor revenue. And it can affect your ability to be able to, you know, naming right. I mean, literally there is nothing, look, I wouldn't say there's nothing you can't do, but data lays the groundwork, data-driven foundation here. By the way, when you're looking at the data, anytime you see blank cells mean that there's just not enough sample size for me to be able to publish that data. It doesn't mean we didn't, you know, that we didn't ask the question, whatever. It just means that we drop below sample size threshold of where we feel confident that the data will in fact be valuable. You know, when you're doing data analytics, sample size is critical. Bigger the sample, the better off you are. Now, it doesn't always mean that a bigger sample is going to be more accurate. And I don't want to get into data accuracy and, you know, start talking about all these statistical rules and models and all that. But it does mean there is a threshold that you will hit where the data just starts to get very, and this is, by the way, a super scientific term, wonky. And you don't want wonky data. You want to make sure the data is steady, and you want to make sure the data is also believable. So we try to stay away from anything that has small sample sizes to it. And don't be afraid, by the way, to question something that doesn't look right. If something doesn't pass the smell test, your smell test, then you know what? Reach out to me. Let's see if it passes my smell test. David, how important was this when you looked at data is kind of that early kind of smell test look for you?
I mean, it really helps me like tailor my project at the very beginning. I kind of found like what exactly I wanted to look at for the team, and when you're looking for like direct ticket sales and trying to get people in the stands, being able to find, like, oh, here's how other teams performed, like with these demographics relative to us, stuff like that was really like important, because then I could go down, I guess, that rabbit hole and see, exactly like deeper and deeper and go into like the demographics of these cities, the demographics of who shows up, like even like finance numbers and stuff like that.
So I just went to remember our second part of the story was minor league hockey. Let's use the minor league hockey data to learn how to understand a little bit more about hockey fans. There is something here that leads me to an interesting story. There are 11,643,000 total fans of minor league hockey. That's split out 7.1 male, 4.5 women, 61 to 39%. Again, I'm rounding up, we're friends. But here's something I also noticed, that 26.5% of male hockey fans attended a game and 25.5% of female. So while the female number might be smaller in terms of volume, or the word I like to use is tonnage, but don't use the word tonnage when you're talking about women. They talk about getting destroyed in a meeting. That sends me a signal. The signal is that women are more than likely, or almost as likely as their male minor league hockey fan counterparts, to attend a game. And then I start looking at all of the different aspects of it, age. I start to look at, income. I start to look at all the different things. But this to me jumped off the page. So you start looking at all these different across the bottom are all 65 of the tabs for all of the questions that we ask in the survey. So in fact, if you wanted to look at, let's say, Snapchat usage. Oh, sorry about that. Let's make this a little bigger. Give me a second here. Need my breakfast. Hey, next year, Professor Hall, let's do this class a little later in the day.
Yeah, I think it would also increase the enrollment.
So we know that 11.6 million.
Let me remind you, Neil, you said you were going to go to a conference today. I had offered up the 9:30 a.m. slot for you, but you said, no, I'm going to be in Dallas. We got to start.
Okay, I thought I was going to be in Dallas.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, my bad. So again, I'm looking at minor league hockey, but remember we talked about that other group. Those are people who are fans of other women's sports. Remember, we're trying to tell a story here. We're trying to grab onto everything we can with respect to data to tell a coherent, fact-based story. So let's go back to our point real quickly in this one, and then I'm going to kind of end it a little bit. We know there are 27,135,000 fans of other women's sports, which are other women's professional and collegiate sports. 15 million are in fact men, 11 million, I didn't round this time, are women. It's a 55 or 56-44 split. So again, understanding the nature of those fans is, I cannot tell you how important it is. And here is one piece of data right away. I'm going to color it just so I can make my point. Younger fans. And David, this would be super important for you too. female fans of women's sports, as you can see from the data, tend to skew younger than their male counterparts in terms of volume. You want to be real understanding of what's going on here, because David wants to reach potential fans. What might he want to look at? He might want to go looking at, women in that, let's say, 18 to 34-year-old group who have children, because they might make up a real good opportunity. Well, they play in a mall, right?
Yeah.
They play in a mall. Who likes to go shopping in malls? That's your question, Dave.
I'm not gonna say it.
We're being recorded right now.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I'll say it. Look, you see more women than men walking around shopping malls. It's no big secret. Okay. It's not like I'm sharing here the theory of relativity. So again, allowing the data to tell the story, allowing the trends to dictate what that story is saying, allowing the data, collecting as much data, building a story, building your case, and then putting it all together. Look, I want to end this. It's already 9:17, but I want to end with this. Sports are fun. Okay, we're not dealing with what I would call, we're not dealing with a pandemic here. We're not dealing with health, and welfare. We're not dealing with oil and gas. We're not dealing many of the things that Professor Hall used to deal with back when he was working in the financial community. Sports are a fun business. If you cannot find the fun, if you cannot have the fun, then sports may not be for you. For people like David and me, it's really a passion. We love sports. I love sports. I've been doing it, 26 years. I've been doing research almost 30. Make sure that it's fun for you. Pick a topic that interests you. Chloe Kim, she loved hockey. She lived in California, for goodness sakes. And I forgot where she lived, but thank you. Southern California. She loved the Kings, but more important, she loved hockey. She picked something she loved. David loves soccer, loved the Houston Dynamos. His first kind of entry into this was to work with something that he loved, that he understood, that he knew. So if you can't love this, if you can't be excited about it, if you can't be passionate about it, then you know what? Find something you're passionate about. I'm passionate about sports. I'm passionate about data. I'm passionate about telling stories with data. And you know what? If people don't want to come along on this ride with me, tough. I'm going to drag them kicking and screaming, because that's just who I am. So I want to thank Professor Hall today for once again inviting me into the class. David, I want to thank you so much for being a willing participant in this. I really appreciate it. David, you're going to have to introduce me. You're going to need to introduce me to your bosses over there at the Riveters. I think we could.
Yeah. I'll talk to them on Friday. We play on Friday, so
tell them to give me 30 minutes and let me demo the data for them, and then I'll make you guys an offer that it will be really hard to refuse. Okay. As because I know you're going to use the data and you'll share things that you're doing with me, as long as I don't share it with people that I'm not allowed to. So again, I want to thank Professor Hall. I want to thank David again for joining us. I want to thank Chloe Kim for being a part of this last year. And I want to thank you all for getting up this early and letting me be part of your class. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being with us. And it was great to have you come in. And I think this really kind of hit home, being here with a former student of the class. But everybody, let's give Neil and David a round of applause.
I didn't hear it, but I saw somebody clap. I saw the gentleman in the white sweatshirt and the hoodie over there clapping. So I'll take my word for it that everybody did. And normally you're lucky. I do like to call on people from time to time. I decided it was probably better to not do that at this early in the morning. If I need coffee, you need coffee. So, I do, by the way, need some coffee. So again, Professor Hall, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. David, great job, buddy. Great
Thank you.
job.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's take a 3-minute break.